This is a Musclecat Media production.
We are in the middle of an under-18 Baseball World Cup presented by Raxus, and here to talk about it. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good mid-morning, good early morning, good late night, good everything, good day to you, sir, and to everybody who's listening. My name's Eric Balnar. I've been sitting and watching a lot of baseball on TV. And the guy that's been on TV that I've been watching is, well, the guy that I talk to multiple times a week anyways, but I've been listening to a lot more than usual. Andrew Reynolds calling all the games from Okinawa, Japan. Rolsey, before you say hello, don't forget to like, subscribe, review. That helps grow this game as well. Now that that's out of the way, Rolsey, are you cool in Japan?
Well, I'm indoors at the moment, so I'm cool right now. It's funny that you say like good day because you don't have any idea what time it is where people are watching. That's how I begin every broadcast at a WBSC event. It's like, look, however you're watching us and wherever you're watching us from, hello. It does me no good to say good morning or good afternoon or good evening. It's just welcome. So I think you nailed that. 10 out of 10.
Dude, you are calling some great games, man. Like, they are super engaging. Like, it's a good sign when like people in the room that I'm in like kind of stop and like turn and they're like, oh, like what's going on here? Because it's just like, yeah, you do a good job of bringing command and people in there. I'm loving listening to you, loving the games. There's been some good ones, particularly pitching, and we're going to talk about them today. So yeah, nice job, man. It sounded really good.
Yeah, thanks, man. And look, Tyler Maughan and I have been talking for several months just about kind of how this tournament has a profile already, but the profile can really be lifted. And we feel like it's, maybe not our responsibility, but we feel like we have a chance to really dig deep and try and tell some of the stories about like what you said, a couple of weeks ago when we did the preview of this tournament. These are some of the names that we're going to be hearing for the next 10, 15 years. And we've already seen some performances. I know we're going to get into it. Some players that we're going to see, on the biggest stages, be it in Asia or North America, wherever, World Baseball Classics, Olympics, those sorts of things. So it's kind of our duty to work hard in the back end so that whenever the games start, that's the easy job for us, right? We just call what's in front of us, but really just try and tell the stories of some of these young men that are playing, because we've seen some pretty incredible feats already in the first 2 days.
So at the time of recording, it is the morning before day 3. We've played 2 days of the tournament. There's 3 more days of group stage, then an off day or a rain day if we need, then the super round, then the gold medal day. You and I are going to meet again on that off day and debrief everything more in depth than what we will do today. Today's a quick hitter, baby. We're going to go through a few things. We're going to go more in depth after the group stage and preview the super round. So really, we are gathered here today in the name of baseball to talk about where things stand through 2 days, who's standing out statistically and with the eye test, and then what could happen particularly tomorrow on day 4. So if you're listening to this, there might be some games already going on. Make sure you follow WBSC. By the way, shout out to WBSC. Loving the volume of interviews, loving the highlights they're posting. The recaps are informative. The hub at WBC is awesome. So make sure you follow that if you want an update. But yeah, should we just crack into it? Should we give a little update of where things stand?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we're through 2 days of play. And again, remember, there are 6 teams in a group and the top 3 advance to the super round. Now, those 3 teams will have their records carry over, and I'll get to that in a second with a real-life example. So games that you play now do count to the next round, but you're going to cut down the field in half for contention for a medal. The other half will play in a placement round. In Group A, here are the standings. Cuba is 2-0. Japan is 2-0. Korea is 1-1. Puerto Rico is 1-1. Italy is 0-2, and South Africa is 0-2. In Group B, Germany is in first place with a 2-0 record. USA is also with a 2-0 record. Australia and Chinese Taipei are both at 1-1. And then China and Panama are at 0-2. Some notable games early on. We'll get to them in a second, but right away on day one, there was an upset, right? Germany beat Australia 5-4. More on Germany soon. And then Australia turned the tides and they upset Panama on day two in a significant moment. USA are 2-0, but it's more how they've got there, right? They had a huge no-hit game yesterday versus Chinese Taipei, who were one of the medal favorites in this event. They no-hit them, and they're 2-0. Germany are 2-0. Now they've beat games. They beat China, which they probably should have, and they upset Australia to be there. In Group A, key games really is that Japan beating Korea last night. I know you want to get into that. And Puerto Rico losing to Korea. That also has potential huge implications on who goes through. Now, I mentioned the carryover earlier. What that means is basically, let's just say Japan and Korea, as expected, get through the top three into the super round. Well, their records are going to carry over. So Japan would have now a 1-0 record, and Korea would be 0-1 because Japan beat Korea. So that game last night matters. It counts towards if you're playing a gold medal. That's where we're up to right now. We've had 6 games a day, 12 total. There's more coming up. Rolsey, any standout games? Avoid talking about the players. Any standout games to you so far?
Yeah, well, I mean, the obvious one that you mentioned earlier was the opening day game between Germany and Australia. I mean, that was the first game that I called. There's that old adage in tournament baseball where you can't win a tournament on day one, but you can lose it. And it's not necessarily that Australia lost it. I mean, this is an Australian team. Jason Pospisil, we had him on the preview show where he spoke about taking things one day at a time, but he really does feel like he has a team that can make a run, not only at a super round, but potentially as a medal. And they've shown that in the first 2 days. But just to see the way that German team took a lead early, got a bit of confidence. I mean, I truly believe Germany's confidence in this tournament started in the top of the first inning of game one when they got that home run, 2-run shot, Oppo Taco right field. All of a sudden, they just lifted. Australia came back, took the lead. Germany snatched it back and then was able to hold on. And then yesterday, just the way that they kind of clinically took care of China, for me, it was just kind of a bit eye-opening. I mean, Jorge Bull, I've talked about it on the broadcast, is he's a lifelong youth baseball guy in Germany. For about 30 years, he's run the Deutsche Baseball Academy in Germany with the expectation that at some point Germany is going to be the European baseball powerhouse. I don't necessarily know that he thought it was going to start 2025 in Okinawa at the U-18 Baseball World Cup. But knowing all of that was happening in the background and then seeing them jump out to a 2-0 lead against Australia, it was like, okay, game on. Bang, from day dot, it was going to be Germany has a chance at the super round. That was a fun game to call. Australia played a fun game against Panama, obviously, as well. Made things a little bit more difficult on themselves than they needed to, probably in the 7th inning. So both games that Australia has played have been very interesting. But the highlight has to be last night. Night number 2, Saturday night, 9,000 people at Okinawa Cellular Stadium. Japan, Korea, back and forth, ding-dong battle early. And then it just, from that point forward, Japan just did what Japan does, right? They just clinically took a hold of things. I mean, I know we'll talk about the pitching matchup in just a little bit, but just kind of talking about a Japan team with so much pressure. Maybe they showed that a little bit early in that game, but as the game flowed on, it's a team that was just so good clinically.
Yeah, I agree, man, particularly about Germany, because sometimes you do see these upset teams at these tournaments, but I think it's the way that Germany's winning, right? They had the lead versus Australia. They came back. They won it. They out-hit them 10-5, and they just look good with the bat, dude. And then yesterday, again, it wasn't that they beat China. They were supposed to. It was how they beat China. They were 1 out away from a no-hitter. So I agree with you. Germany's been really impressive. Australia beating Panama is huge for the group. It keeps things complicated, which is kind of nice because there's a few wild scenarios now, right? Like if you take a look at how things could potentially play out, if Australia beat China and then Australia beat Chinese Taipei, and Germany lose to Panama, but Chinese Taipei beat Germany. There's a lot going on, so I understand if you don't follow me. But there is a potential here that Germany still don't make it through to the super round and Australia do from that perspective. And then all of a sudden the record that carries over, that game versus Germany won't matter for Australia. On the other hand, if Australia end up with the same record as Germany and lose on a head-to-head, well, then Australia's out because they lost to Germany and Germany go through. So there's just so many dynamics at play, but I agree. Quickly, just one more thing. Shout out to Cuba. They've outscored opponents 18-0 in their first two games. Yes, they beat teams they should win, but they are dominating. They're hitting, they're pitching. They've only allowed 4 hits. So shout out to Cuba as well for really impressing on the team stage as well.
Yeah, and I haven't gotten a chance to look at Cuba just yet, but I will be calling that game this afternoon when they take on Japan at Okinawa Cellular, and I'm really looking forward to that. It's oddly a 2:00 game, and I queried that, and the reason is because it's a Sunday afternoon, and J-Sport wanted it to be a matinee game on Sunday afternoon in television here in Japan. How good. So, yeah, really looking forward to Japan-Cuba this afternoon. A couple of 2-0 teams going at it.
That could be huge too, because if Cuba are as good as we think they could be and they beat and upset Japan, then that carries over to the super round as well. So those are some big games to watch. All right, we'll get to the players in a moment, Rolsey, but let's skip ahead and take a look at some potentially impactful games. So the day 3 schedule, you're probably listening in the middle of it, so I'm not even going to bother with that. Just go to the WBSC website. I want to get you primed for day 4, because there are some matchups that will probably determine who goes through, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts on it. So USA will play China. I suspect USA would win that game. But then you have Cuba playing Puerto Rico, which could again be a game that determines who goes through, right? Like if Cuba lose to Japan and Puerto Rico win the games they're supposed to, this could be the game that determines who is third place if you go by things on paper. So before we go to the next one, am I right in that assessment? Cuba and Puerto Rico, that could be the game that decides who goes through as the third team in Group B, or Group A rather?
Yeah. I mean, certainly, I think that's probably the case. I mean, I think Japan and Korea are probably nailed on based on the game that they played last night. That was uber competitive. I mean, today Cuba really gets their first test, so we'll probably know a little bit more about Cuba after the afternoon game today, but I think you're right. I mean, that game is so intriguing for so many reasons, and it's a morning game, so it's like wake up, have your cup of coffee straight away. Cuba, Puerto Rico basically playing each other for what we think will be a chance for the super round. So you're right. Day 4 starts off with a bang, doesn't it?
But the real one is what's in the middle, and it's the 3 p.m. games. There's 2 going on at once. So the way I'm kind of reading this right now, and again, this could change if China beats Australia. And that wouldn't be crazy because China beat Australia at the Under-23 World Cup just this time last year. But let's just say Australia beats China today. And again, I'm not going to assume anything. But if that's the case, we're going to have some crazy, tasty games at 3 p.m. because Australia plays Chinese Taipei and Germany plays Panama. Now, the way I read it is you have USA at number 1, and there's probably 4 teams fighting for 2 spots, and they all play each other at that 3 p.m. game. So if Australia and Chinese Taipei, it might end up being the game that determines who goes to the Super Round 2, especially if Germany keep doing what they're doing, which would be a bit of a shock. But Germany and Panama, that's the last chance really for Panama to get themselves back in this group. Panama needs to beat Germany or their tournament is done. That is a simple equation. And if Germany beats Panama, well, they'll have gone through and beat Australia, Panama, and Germany, and China rather, the 3 teams they needed to beat. And that's probably going to be good enough for them to get into the super round. So tomorrow is a massive game. It literally probably sees if Germany upsets the world and goes to the super round, and it all happens at the same time with some scoreboard watching. Those are the ones I want to watch. Which ones are you calling?
I'd have to go back and look. I can't exactly remember. One day at a time. I'm like Jason Pospisil, Eric. I'm taking everything one day at a time. But you're right. A lot hinges on the China-Australia game. Panama take on Chinese Taipei today as well, which is interesting. But interestingly enough, Panama could still drop that game today and be 0-3 and still have a relatively easy path. Not easy path, but they could control their own destiny in terms of getting to the super round still. So the big one in that group definitely is, well, because they do still have China left to play and they still have Germany left to play. So in theory, if there's a 3-way tie between Australia, Germany, and Panama. If Panama have a big score against Germany, TQB comes into account and all those sorts of things. So even at 2-3 with a big score over Germany, Panama could potentially still get into the super round. So they could lose today, be 0-3, and their tournament isn't necessarily over just because of the way that the schedule has sort of worked out for them. But again, for all of that to still be live, and you're 100% right, all but one team could be vying for 3 super round spots on day 4 in Group B if Australia takes care of China today. So that would make for wild viewing in the last 2 days of the regular, or of the opening round, rather, if Australia is able to take care of business against China today.
I feel like we are discounting China a little bit in the respect that if China beats Australia today, let's assume they lose to the USA tomorrow. Sorry, China. They'd be 1-3. But that means that they would play Panama on the last day, which means China would still be in with a shot, especially because they scored those 5 late runs, even though they had 1 hit versus Germany. That kind of keeps them in the mix a little bit. Like there could be potentially a 4-way tie at 2-3. Like that is a legitimate scenario that could happen, and one of those teams would go through on TQB. So there's a few weird scenarios at play right here. So China still has a hope too, but their tournament is done if they lose to Australia. There's no doubt about that. And
Correct.
Australia's
And
tournament
that's,
is
I guess
probably
that's sort of
on
the point.
serious life support if they lose to China.
Yeah, well, and that's sort of the point, right? Is that China-Australia game right now is a battle for each of those two teams' tournament life. If Australia wins and they're at 2-1, they're in a pretty good spot. If China wins and they're at 1-2, they really still have a tough road to get to the super round. Germany and Panama and Chinese Taipei are probably stoked if China does beat Australia, because it probably eliminates 2 teams just because China's path is so difficult. But that's why that game becomes so intriguing.
You mentioned this a lot, Rolsey. These tournaments are interesting because in baseball, it's unique to other sports that the performance of your junior teams count towards the world rankings. And there's a cutoff for the Premier 12, which is now going to be the Premier 16. Top 12 teams automatically qualify, and then there's basically a playoff for the last 4 spots between the next 6 teams. Is that right? 6 teams, yeah, on the list to try to round out that field. Now, China and Germany are 18 and 19 respectively entering the tournament, and Germany beat China, and that could be huge in determining who ends up above each other at the end of the tournament and maybe deciding who gets through on that cutoff. Other ranking points to consider, Cuba off to a hot start. They could theoretically leapfrog Australia, who are in 10th. Cuba is at 11th or 12th right now, but Australia beat number 9 Panama, who are about 300 points of them in the standings. So if Australia get through to the super round and Panama don't, Australia could move up into the single digits in the world rankings. So it's just something to monitor, and we'll have to break down that when we know the clarity of the cutoff of the top 6 of this tournament on our Wednesday show. But I thought those matchups were interesting when you have 9 versus 10 play each other and 18 versus 19 with some implications about where things could end up.
Tyler and I talked about this sort of in the late stages of last night's broadcast of the Japan-Korea game, is how a seemingly innocuous afternoon game on day 2 in Okinawa between Germany and China can mean so much, but it really did, right? And look, there have been some whispers that there are 2 wildcard teams that will get into the Premier 12 play-in. It's been talked about that, in China being in 19th, potentially could get one of those wildcard spots, either being, one of the last 2 teams in, or by potentially being a host. We know they have that beautiful facility in Shaoxing, so it may not necessarily knock them out of the Premier 12, but you certainly want to be in that top 18 just to make sure that it's secured. But there was something like 16 ranking points or something that separates those two in 18 and 19. So it was an interesting storyline, again, to what would be an otherwise seemingly innocuous game on day 2 of a World Cup, meaning quite a bit for each of those 2 national team programs.
Well, we've talked about the teams. Let's talk about the players, because this is, as we've noted with our guests on our preview podcast, Tyler Monahan, Jeff Duda, 2 great international reporters and commentators in their own right. They both made it quite clear they love this tournament because you get to see players who will have significant impact on the game of baseball in the next few years. So let's roll out some of those names, Rolsey. Now, how I want to do this is, you've been there in person. You've seen these guys firsthand. I've watched through a screen. I'm going to give you the stats of some leaders and people that have stood out, and you tell me, either add on to it or give me some guys that maybe are passing the eye test but aren't on the stat sheet yet. Does that sound fair?
Let's
do it. So let's start with the hit leaders right now, because the two hit leaders, they have got 5 hits apiece. It starts in Cuba with Jonathan Moreno. He's looked really, really good. He's got a couple RBIs, a couple doubles, good OPS. But it's Alessandro Carrascaia. How do you pronounce his name? He leads off for Germany, I know. He seems to always get a hit every time he comes up to bat. Those two guys lead with 5 hits apiece. But on base percentage-wise, there's a few guys that just don't get out, it seems like. And one of them is Ida Semikawa, who has an OBP of 833 in his 5 plate appearances so far. Carlos Castilla from Panama is also an on-base machine, and Kazuki Takahata seems to always get on base. He's 3 for 3 with a couple walks as well for Japan. Those dudes are the on-base machines. There's only been 2 homers in the tournament, so we'll get to that. It's Emmanuel Rodriguez on Puerto Rico and Robin Spies on Germany. I'm sure we'll have some more power numbers as the tournament progresses. Really being a tournament for the pitchers so far, so I'll get into that in a second. But any hitters that you've kind of noticed, maybe using the StatCast stuff that you have access to?
Yeah, look, there have been a few. You mentioned Ita Semikawa. I've really enjoyed watching him play. I'm interested to see sort of how his career progresses, because he's not a big guy, but he plays a very good second base as well. I mean, he's played an incredible second base, Semikawa has. But he's allowed Jason Pospisil to kind of have that second leadoff position because of the speed that he possesses and the fact that he just has bat-to-ball skills. I mean, at one point, I think he had reached on his first 5 plate appearances and had put the ball in play once. So it just shows the type of value. And being a diminutive type of a guy that I am.
He's batting 2.
What was that?
He's batting 2 today. He's moving up the lineup.
Well, I mean, that's just his manager rewarding him. And I think, obviously we haven't spoken much about it, but Australia does have maybe one of their middle of the order bats that is unavailable due to some heat exhaustion and some other things. So it's Jason Pospisil probably just moving some things around. But again, being a diminutive human like myself, I tend to gravitate toward those smaller, sort of scrappy guys. And Ita Semikawa is probably one of them that won't grab many of the headlines, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him, because I think he has done an excellent job of setting a table for an Australian team that still is sort of scratching and clawing and fighting for their lives. Probably not the sexy pick for the player to watch in the tournament, but look, I think if you enjoy good fundamental bat-to-ball baseball and patient at bats, I think you'll enjoy watching Ita Semikawa play for Australia. And he's a cool story too, right? Because he's a naturalized Australian citizen, was born in Japan, getting to play for Australia back in the country of his birth. So he's been a player I've really been interested in and been pulling for a little bit.
He only got his citizenship 6 months ago, which is a pretty cool story in itself. What about anyone? I want to talk about guys that have power. That's the way of the game, but there hasn't been many home runs. There haven't been a lot of extra base hits in it. No one has 2 doubles in this tournament for the first 2 days, which is crazy. Have you seen any hard hit balls and contact from any player in any of the games you've been watching or calling?
We were talking about this last night. Look, it'll probably pick up as the tournament goes on. I do think the conditions have something to do with it. The humidity being so thick, particularly during the day, and even at night, the ball doesn't really travel in Okinawa. Japan did have a few hard hit balls last night that were either run down in the gap or, sort of ended up being, down the line doubles. So I think it'll be interesting to see sort of how that progresses, but where I don't think we're going to see many home runs historically at this tournament at fair playing fields. We don't see a lot of home runs because the pitching is so good. I think the home run leader from a team standpoint 2 years ago was like 4 team home runs, right? So you're not going to see heaps and heaps of them because the pitching is so good, which is why it makes it a surprise for a broadcaster whenever a ball is absolutely cranked and goes over the fence. It's sort of a I was caught off guard at that home run that Germany hit in the top of the first inning on day 1 of the tournament because we just don't see him very much. So it really is a tournament so far that has been pitching dominated, but it's not to say that somebody's not going to leap out of the ground and show us a bit of power as the tournament progresses.
Isn't there a dude on the States who is just like torching balls, but they're just not kind of following, or they're just like hard hit singles as well?
No, he's a pitcher. So we've gotten some of the StatCast data that's been shared with us just from a broadcast standpoint, and he's not one that's gotten the headlines. I know we'll sort of talk about that United States combined perfect game, or combined no hitter yesterday, but it's Gio Rojas, who is, I mean, he's a consensus Gatorade All-American, but he's got the 4 fastest pitches that have been thrown in this tournament, and 3 of them are to the same guy in 3 different at bats. It was against Carlos Castillo. I'm not really sure what Carlos Castillo did to upset Gio Rojas so much, but it's funny because there's a lot of other U.S. pitchers that have sort of taken the headlines with, I mean, obviously for good reason. But Gio Rojas, who's sort of a class of 2026 guy from Parkland, Florida, hasn't committed anywhere. I would imagine that he's probably going to go into the draft. I mean, he was Baseball America's National Pitcher of the Year last year, and it's easy to see why, right? Because he's got a 98-mile-an-hour fastball. He's got a good slider with a lot of bite. And for whatever reason, he has a vendetta against Carlos Castillo because he continues to throw him some of the fastest pitches in the tournament. So I haven't seen the United States yet in commentary, but I did go back and look at those 3 pitches, and suffice to say that, look, there's some big league hitters that probably wouldn't catch up with his velo. So he's been one that's been really fun to sort of dissect. I don't know when we'll see him again. It's funny for the United States, right? Because now they're sort of 2-0. They got that no-hitter against Chinese Taipei, which they would probably consider their biggest threat in that group. So I don't know what we'll see from them pitching-wise in the next 3 days. You take the heat into account. You don't want to throw guys if you don't have to, those sorts of things. So I don't know when we'll see Gio Rojas again, but he's one from a pitching standpoint that I'm quite excited to see again.
Well, the USA can kind of afford to wait, I guess, with their pitching matchups, right? Like today they play, who do they have on day 3, the USA? They've got Germany, right? So you'd think they'd go after Germany or Australia in terms of seeing another arm, just because they want to secure that win. Like they want to go through with a 2-0 record, and it's probably going to be Germany or Australia. They're going to need another win for. They've already beat Panama. I'll go into pitcher stats in a second, but hard hit balls, I did see Josh Nadai from Australia hit a ball 108 miles per hour. That's 174 kilometers an hour on a double. And that's like big league exit velocity, right? Like that ball is crushed. He's committed to go to Division I in Oregon State, following the footsteps of one of his brother's best friends. His brother's Jimmy Nadai, one of his best friends, Travis Bazzana, and Travis Bazzana went to Oregon State, got drafted 1 overall. So those are the hard hit ones I've seen. Anyone else stand out for you before I go into the pitcher stats?
Well, your eye is pretty good because I do have exit velocity stats as well. And Josh Nadai has the hardest hit ball of the tournament. That was that ball that I think you're thinking of against Juan Ortega in the 4th inning against Panama. Josh Nadai has 2 of the hardest hit balls in the tournament. The other is Grady Emerson. So that's interesting that the maybe potentially number 1 overall pick and Josh Nadai of Australia, who is going to Oregon State, are the 2 guys that have the top 3 hardest hit balls so far in the tournament. So your eye's good. If your eye told you it was hard hit, it's a good eye because it was.
Wow, great. Perfect. I should maybe watch baseball for a living. That would be cool. Anyways, let's take a look at some pitchers. Some stats obviously jump out off there, and I guess we have to start with the combined no-hitter, right? And the star of that show was Carson Bowman. Oh my goodness. He's committed to Wake Forest. He's going to go high in an MLB draft at some point. 5 innings, 11 strikeouts, two walks allowed, so just the 2 base runners. He was then there was a closer as well. I'm forgetting his name, and now I feel bad for doing that. But it was a combined no hitter. But Carson Bowman was the star of that one. The 11 strikeouts leads the tournament. That was crazy. Shota Morishita has 8 strikeouts in 5 1/3 innings pitched for Japan. He was also good. He allowed just 4 hits. No walks was the impressive thing there. How about Jonah Weidman on Germany? I don't know if it's pronounced Wiedemann. My German needs to be better. But Jonah Wiedemann, man, he goes 5 innings, no hits, 8 strikeouts with 3 walks versus China. And on opening day, Johan Choi, my goodness, 8 strikeouts, 4 2/3, perfect. No hits, no walks, no runs. Those really stood out to me. Ian Chung from Chinese Taipei as well, 8 strikeouts in 4 innings. Same with Richard DeJesus, 8 strikeouts in 4 innings for Puerto Rico. Those are kind of the standouts. So I like that there because I just said a pitcher from USA, 1 from Germany, 1 from Japan, 1 from Korea, 1 from Chinese Taipei, and 1 from Puerto Rico. Those are 6 different countries. I also thought Damian Wilson, for completely different reasons, was brilliant yesterday for Australia against a good Panama team, needed to win. You called it brilliantly that you said it was a cerebral outing, but it was old school, right? Like he was throwing low 80s stuff, getting a lot of ground balls. He allowed 5 hits, but 2 of them were infield singles. He allowed a leadoff triple 1 inning. That runner scored, and he got 3 straight outs and limited the damage. So a really cerebral outing. So maybe you might see Carson Bowman use that power and that high-end stuff, which obviously we're going to see. Rojas is the same. But I kind of like that we had a throwback pitcher do some damage as well that you saw from Damian Wilson. So, yeah, a few different names that stand out there statistically. The no-hitter and the almost no-hitter and the perfect, near-perfect game obviously go on there too. But yeah, any matchups that you liked?
I think the one that it didn't go under the radar, but it didn't really deliver was the game that we saw last night. Just quickly on Carson Bowman, I did see an interview that he did with USA Baseball after the game last night. And you want to talk about a humble 17-year-old kid. Like, he just said, I felt like I had my best stuff today. He felt like he had his best stuff today, which is, he didn't come out and say, oh, I felt dominant. You know, it was this, that, it was the other. There was no cockiness to it. It was just kind of like, I went out there to do a job. We knew Chinese Taipei was going to be a team that we needed to beat, and I felt like I had my best stuff. I wish I could do anything in life as well as he pitched last night and be as humble as he was. I thought it was very subdued, and you can tell that this USA team. I talked to Rick Eckstein before the game or before the tournament started, and we talked about it. Last week that it's a USA team that was a bit disjointed maybe a couple years ago and wasn't playing team baseball. But I think that quote sort of summarized a lot where this USA team is, because Carson Bowman was like, "I just need to go out and get a win for my team." And I felt like I had my best stuff. It wasn't about me. It was about putting a team in the right spot to be able to win the game. So I thought that was an interesting take. When we look at that Korea
and hard to beat, man. Holy smokes.
I think a lot of people knew that going in. Like there's having won 4 of the last 5, and then kind of laying an egg like they did last World Cup. I think a lot of people were expecting that, but I do just want to touch on the pitching matchup that we saw last night between Korea and Japan. We build it as, potentially the pitching matchup of the tournament and maybe one of the best pitching matchups that we have seen in recent memory at one of these tournaments, because you've basically had 2 guys going head-to-head that many are projecting could be the number 1 overall pick in their respective countries' pro league drafts. So Ryosuke Sahoshi of Japan, he was basically one of 2 aces on the Okinawa high school team that won Koshin. So getting to pitch back in Okinawa against Korea under the lights on a Saturday night. And he was going against Ji-won Park, who many consider will be the number 1 overall pick in a KBO draft. Yet the jury's still out on Sahoshi a little bit. And look, both of these guys are in the 90s. Park, we saw him a couple times hit 155, 156 last night to the oohs and ahs of the Japanese crowd. He's talked a lot about a dream to potentially go play in Major League Baseball, but his dad played in the KBO, so he wants to play in Korea before he chases any sort of big league dream. We were expecting this to be one of those classic, like each guy goes 6 innings, gives up a combined 3 hits. It's nothing in the 6th inning. And it's not really what we saw. We saw both guys struggle a little bit, whether that's the weight of a World Cup, the weight of a rivalry game, playing in front of, that crowd. Sahoshi, to come down off of Koshin, we've talked about that. Is that a factor sort of a thing? So even though that we've seen them already in this tournament and they weren't necessarily overly impressive. I mean, Park came out of the game after an inning and 2/3. Sahoshi did end up going 4 innings, but gave up 4 hits, 2 earned runs, only struck out 3. The strikeout numbers weren't necessarily high. I would just caution, if anybody watched that game last night or just box score hunts and looks at those 2 pitchers and says, well, I'm not necessarily going to bother tuning into either of those 2 guys, I would say that's a mistake. I don't know when either of them are going to pitch again. I would imagine it's sometime in the super round, and they couldn't match up again until a gold medal game. But if we saw that same pitching matchup in a gold medal game, I can promise you that the outcome is going to be very different. So I would just keep an eye on each of those 2, Ryosuke Sahoshi of Japan and Ji-won Park of Korea, because we will see them again. And guys like this in this tournament historically don't have bad back-to-back outings. So Just two to keep an eye on, and two that I'm really excited to see pitch again. Maybe they match up again. Maybe they don't in a World Championship final. But I'm definitely looking forward to each of those two pitching again just to get another look at them.
There have been 67 pitchers who have took the mound so far through 2 days and 12 games of the tournament so far. Have we seen everybody's ace at this point of the tournament, or are there still more to come that you might know of?
I would say that we probably have. Whether or not we have seen each team's best back of the bullpen arm is maybe yet to be determined. Funny enough, we saw Chinese Taipei's closer on opening night against China, and I'm not really sure why that was. It was a strange one for Chinese Taipei because they took a while to get going. I mean, it was nothing in the fourth inning against China. They just couldn't get the bats going, and that's kind of been a problem for them throughout this tournament, as evidenced by being no hit by the United States yesterday. But they trotted their closer out, Su Long Hong, who sort of was relatively unknown about 12 months ago, and then now is all of a sudden throwing 95, 96 miles an hour with a big wipeout slider. And he was probably the most impressive shutdown arm of the tournament that I've seen. I mean, again, take it with a grain of salt. He was facing China. It was a 7-0 game, but faced 3 hitters, struck all 3 of them out, mixed his pitches well. I think he threw 1 pitch out of the zone. So he came out and it was clinical. So it was almost as though Chinese Taipei were like, look, let's just dust off the nerves. It's a zero stress situation. But they've made note that he is going to be their closer. And to see him on opening day in a game that really meant nothing, I thought was kind of interesting.
Maybe just a tune-up.
Well, and I mean, that's a tactic, right? Because you don't want to have to break the wrapper on that guy in a huge, high leverage type of a spot.
Yeah.
You want him to already have come into the game. So whether or not we've seen the best back of the bullpen arm for each team, I don't know. Maybe we haven't for the United States. Maybe we haven't for Korea, for instance. There's no reason why they would have thrown their best to the back of the bullpen arm last night. The long reliever that came in for Japan last night was excellent, who ended up closing things out, but he's a pseudo starter, right? So those are the kinds of things that probably we will start to see as the opening round draws to a close, and then into the super round as sort of those really high-powered back of the bullpen arms for each of these teams.
I'm looking forward to seeing Australia's secret weapon, Patrick Crotty, today start for China. He could be used in the back of the bullpen later too, but this guy missed the national championships because of an injury earlier in January. Didn't get to play for Queensland. Wasn't on the initial invite list to selection camp. Got a late invite to selection camp in August. Threw harder than any other player at Australian selection camp, and has that kind of 93-ish mile per hour. Jason Pospisil called him out in our preview show. He's starting versus China today. Looking forward to that. I have one final question for you, though, Rolsey, before we go, and it's a stat question. I've run some numbers for you. Now, I mentioned earlier, there have been 67 arms who have appeared in this tournament so far through 2 days. 23 of them have pitched for 3 innings or more, and those are going to get stretched out as the tournament goes on and pitch counts are monitored. Of those 67 arms, and I'm just giving you some time to do some math in your mind, let that digest, how many pitchers have allowed more than 2 extra base hits of those 67? And keep in mind, 23 have gone 3 innings or more, so that might help you out a little bit.
Only because, and look, I don't know the exact answer, but I know it's not many, because in all the games that I've done, I've been just sort of looking through how many extra base hits each teams have. And we haven't seen just a ton of extra base hits. I mean, you talked about how we've only seen 2 home runs. We haven't seen loads of extra base hits. So I'm going to say the number is it's well south of 10, maybe less than 5 of those pitchers have given up multiple extra base hits.
Give me a number.
3.
Lower.
Wow. 0.
Correct. That is the right answer. No,
I should have known that was the answer.
That was extra base hits.
That was the most Eric Balnar question of all time. I should have known the answer. You backed me into a corner there, and I, instead of swinging, I just folded over.
Well, I like doing that because it's unbelievable, right? Like there's you'd be thinking that. You'd be like, Eric's tricking me here, but there's no way the answer's 0 because I couldn't believe it too. I was going through the stat portal like 3 times being like, this can't be right. But yeah, I can't find a guy that's given up more than 2 extra base hits. So it's a pretty cool story. pitching really is the theme of the tournament early on, and the team that pitches the best is probably going to win this thing. It's a really easy game, baseball.
Just on that, and before we go, pitching wins these tournaments. It's obvious, right? You can say that sort of anecdotally, but historically and statistically, you can look at pitching and say the team that pitches the best is going to win, because we don't see a lot of home runs in this tournament. To your point, we haven't seen a lot of extra base hits. I was just looking at Chinese Taipei's pitching staff from 2 years ago when they won the silver medal. In something like, the math is going to fail me, 61 innings. So they were, maybe it was 63 innings. The math works out that it probably should be 63 innings. I can't remember the exact numbers. They had allowed 7 earned runs in the entire tournament 2 years ago and had an 0.8 earned run average and did not win the World Championship final. So that's how hard it is. You can have a pitching staff that is that good, that is that elite, and still not win a World Championship in this tournament.
I always look at fielding, though, right? Because that is what you do when the moment and the pressure is on. So right now, here's a good anecdote about how important fielding is. So the team through 2 days that is fielding the ball the best is Australia. They have a .985 fielding percentage. They have made 1 error. That error cost them the winning run versus Germany on day 1 and could end up costing them a super round spot. So it's not necessarily, it has to do with how many errors you make. You field the ball cleanly, you're going to win a lot of games. But it's when those errors happen as well. And that probably magnifies the value of moments in tournament baseball better than anyone, is the team that has fielded the ball the best has made 1 error, and that unearned run cost them the game versus Germany.
Tournament baseball giveth, and tournament baseball taketh away.
That is probably a good way to end it. Andrew Reynolds will let you go call the games today. We hope you enjoy. Day 4 is where it's at tomorrow. There's a lot of implications. Make sure you follow Baseball Expats on Instagram. We are posting a few updates and stories that we see during the day as well, so you can join in on the fun and the chat. Cool to see the followers start to grow on that over the last few days. Again, like and subscribe, review, give us some stars. Give us 5, please. That's how many stat stars we want on this one. But Rolsey, you're doing a great job over there. I'll continue to watch with interest, and I look forward to chatting to you on Wednesday.
Thanks, buddy. Look forward to catching up. Look forward to the next couple of days of baseball. And look, hopefully there's a little bit of chaos that we can talk about at the end of the opening round.